All right. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy, Shaman Gabriel, your friendly neighborhood shaman. And today we're here to talk about addiction and how to recover from it and how to potentially transform this into your superpower. We're going to look at many forms of addiction during this stream. All of it is for educational purposes. Anyone that we show, do not reach out to them to protect their identity and to protect them. And I just wanted to go ahead and share a little bit about my story with addiction. The funny thing about addiction is that when you have it, you really don't notice it. And coming up, I was one who, like all my friends and probably all the kids during my time, all the guys at least, I was addicted to porn. I was addicted to procrastination. I was addicted to saying but not doing. And I grew a slight addiction to cannabis. Now, I know many out there say you can't really be addicted to cannabis, but you can become how do I say? Reliant on it in little forms. And what I found is that most of my addiction stemmed from unresolved trauma and not processing what I needed to process fully and not being strong up here to make a decision to turn that into something positive for myself. So to get started, I have a few videos that I want to share. We're going to go into what addiction is. We're going to go into gambling addiction. We're going to go into dopamine, the power of procrastination. What is it really? And then we'll show some positive examples of how to transform your addiction into your superpower and the power of neuroplasticity, the ability to rewire your brain. That's the big thing. When I finally discovered that my mind is a computer, I realized that I had the potential to delete all the information in it that was not serving me. And it took courage, and it took patience, and it took a yearning to get to the other side. And during that process, it was really, really difficult. But it was worth the journey. So we're going to go on this little journey today together. And thank you for joining. So let's start with this. What is addiction? So addiction is a complex chronic condition that affects the brain and behavior, compelling individuals to compulsively seek and use a substance or engage in an activity despite knowing the negative consequences. It can involve substances like alcohol, opioids, nicotine, and other drugs, or behaviors such as gambling, sex, food, or even screen time. You can see how people are addicted to their phones and social media. While the outward expression of addiction can vary, at its core, addiction hijacks the brain's reward system, rewiring it to prioritize the addictive substance or behavior above all else. At the neurobiological level, addiction is rooted in the brain's dopamine system. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter responsible for feelings of pleasure and reward. And when a person uses an addictive substance or engages in a behavior that triggers dopamine, the brain is flooded with feel-good chemicals, reinforcing that activity over time. The brain begins to associate the substance or behavior with survival itself. Our brain starts to trick ourselves. We start to prefer the addiction over true life. Creating an overwhelming urge to repeat it over and over. As this cycle continues, natural sources of pleasure like relationships, food, or exercise begin to pale in comparison. And this results in emotional numbing, lack of motivation, and an increasing reliance on the addictive substance or behavior to feel normal. Addiction is not a moral failing or a lack of willpower. It's a disease of disconnection, often rooted in trauma, stress, unmet emotional needs, or a deep longing for escape. Many people with addiction report feeling empty, disconnected from themselves and others, or burdened by unresolved pain. For them, addiction becomes a coping mechanism, a way to avoid confronting difficult emotions, memories, or realities. And there are two major types of addiction: substance use disorders and behavioral addictions. Substance use disorders include dependencies on alcohol or drugs. Behavioral addictions involve compulsions around activities like gambling, gaming, or even social media, which can activate the same reward circuits in the brain, regardless of the form. Addiction follows a predictable pattern: craving, loss of control, continued use despite harm, and withdrawal symptoms when the substance or behavior is reduced or stopped. The consequences of addiction are far-reaching. Physically, it can lead to organ damage, disease, and premature death. Psychologically, it often brings depression, anxiety, paranoia, or psychosis. Socially, it disrupts relationships, careers, and self-worth. But perhaps the most painful effect is the spiritual disconnection. It serves our connection to our authentic selves and to others. It severs that connection, leaving us isolated in a world that no longer feels safe or meaningful. However, addiction is treatable. Healing involves more than abstaining. It requires a deep process of reconnection to the body, to feelings, to inner truth, and to supportive communities. Therapy such as psychedelic therapy, trauma-informed counseling, mindfulness practices, 12-step programs, somatic work, and plant medicine journeys are increasingly being used to address not just the symptoms, but the root causes of addiction, which is that trauma, the stress, whatever feelings are stuck inside the body, inside the mind, that need to be processed and let go so you can integrate and become and move past. In essence, addiction is the soul's cry for reconnection. It asks not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And when that question is held with compassion and curiosity, true transformation becomes possible. So it's important to note that it doesn't matter who you are, we're all addicted to something. Are you addicted to food? Are you addicted to social media? Are you addicted to porn? Are you addicted to watching TV, Netflix? These are all dopamine hits, and these are all addictive things. Which means if you're reliant on it, if you're becoming addicted to something, there is something within inside you that needs to be processed, that needs to be resolved. And that awareness is what awakens us, is what enlightens us, and what gives us a deeper connection that we may be yearning for. So what causes addiction, and why is it so hard to treat?
As of 2021, more than 36 million people worldwide were estimated to be experiencing substance abuse disorder. This condition spans a spectrum of patterned drug use that causes issues in a person's life. At the more severe end of the spectrum is substance addiction. To understand why some people are more susceptible to addiction and why it can be so difficult to treat, let's take a look at how addictive drugs affect the body. When someone repeatedly uses an addictive substance, their brain may adjust to account for its regular presence. This is called tolerance. It diminishes the drug's effect and means more is required to produce the same experience. Alcohol, for instance, increases the transmission of chemical messengers like endorphin and GABA, which promote sensations of pleasure and calmness. When someone uses alcohol frequently, their brain will adapt to its presence. So when they don't use it, their brain receives fewer signals from those pleasure and calm-inducing neurotransmitters, which impacts their energy and mood. In addition to the unique effects each addictive substance has, all of them alter the release of dopamine in a brain region called the nucleus accumbens. This area is part of the brain's reward pathway, which is sensitive to experiences that give us pleasure and drives us to repeatedly seek them out. The reward pathway is essential to our well-being, but addictive substances also exploit it. When someone is repeatedly using a substance and their body has adapted to its presence, they may develop dependence, where the drug is necessary for them to function comfortably. Meanwhile, repeated use can decrease the influence of the brain's cortex, which is responsible for driving deliberate decision-making and limiting impulsive behaviors. And it can increase the influence of the brain's subcortex, which is crucial in habit learning and impulsivity. Together, these changes can make someone feel a lack of control over how they're using a substance. This can mean suffering in other facets of their life and taking risks to continue using it. If the substance leaves their system, their body's equilibrium is disrupted, so they may experience cravings that motivate thoughts and behaviors of seeking and using the drug. And if they continue without the substance, they may experience withdrawal. Opioids, for example, relieve pain and induce sedation. Withdrawal from them causes heightened pain, anxiety, and insomnia. The faster a drug reaches the brain and stimulates the reward pathway, the more addictive it is. For example, heroin and morphine have similar effects, but heroin's chemical structure enhances its ability to penetrate the blood-brain barrier and bind to specific receptors. This makes it faster acting and more addictive than morphine. Meanwhile, compared to nicotine patches and gum, regular and electronic cigarettes are more addictive because smoking and vaping deliver nicotine to the brain fastest. Depending on their chemical structure and mode of delivery, drugs vary in how addictive they are. But people also vary in how susceptible they are to substance use disorder. Scientists think this is due to a mix of life experiences and genetically inherited traits, though neither predetermines addiction. Trauma and mental health conditions appear to make people more susceptible, and overall, using addictive substances before 18 is considered a strong risk factor. This is in part because the reward pathways of younger brains are especially sensitive. Many of the genetic factors at play remain unknown, but some genes do seem to track with certain substance use disorders. For example, specific genes increase the risk for nicotine addiction by making certain receptors more sensitive to nicotine and withdrawal from it more difficult. At the same time, some genes actually make people more resistant to substance use disorders, such as genes that slow the breakdown of alcohol, leading to unpleasant side effects that make people less interested in drinking. In fact, one drug that treats alcohol use disorder operates with this very mechanism. Detoxing from a substance the body has become dependent on can be extremely difficult, and in some cases, abruptly quitting can also be physically risky, so it isn't always advised. Beyond detoxing, quitting is often a long-term process. It's aided by treatment plans that prioritize addressing underlying conditions, developing new associations with experiences previously linked with drug use, and creating safe, supportive environments. Ultimately, both addiction and recovery are the results of a brain with an incredible ability to adapt from experience. If you're interested in accessing resources for yourself or others, you can find free.
Check out smartrecovery.com if you guys are interested in some resources. What we're going to do, it's important not to judge people that have addiction because it is a disease. And you may have a strong mind where you can say, dude, just make the choice, right? Just make the choice. I'm going to show you a video that I stumbled upon that is about gambling addiction. And it's this guy, Boss Man Jack. And he's quite funny, but it's quite sad what he's going through. He's in rehab right now. But this is for educational purposes. And if you're addicted, you can see how some of the traits of your addiction may be highlighted in just some of this guy's mannerisms, how he acts, reacts, short temper, all of that. So let's just check this out for educational purposes.
Disclaimer.
This video is educational and informative in nature. Do not contact any of the people mentioned or depicted in this video. Additionally, this video contains discussion
If you want to see this full video, shout out to Turkey Tom. Check him out on YouTube.
Of gambling. Do not gamble. I have linked various resources on getting help for gambling addictions below for anyone who needs it. Thank you. 99% of gamblers quit right before they're about to hit it big. That remaining 1% of people all know that the only way they won't win is if the rats rigged it. But if they play their cards just right, they'll make it all back, and so much more. That 1% is none other than the rat exterminator, the conqueror of Keno, the pipe-hitting, loss-chasing, bet-making maniac himself, Boss Man Jack.
No! I lost it all! I'll clean it all up.
Today, I'm going to tell you a story. The story of how a regular kid from Virginia went from a juvenile delinquent to one of the top gambling streamers on Kick. How he turned his life into a living hell, his nice bedroom into filthy squalor, and how he got sent to jail and rehab more times than I can count. Curtis Peterson was a regular 90s kid. He was into skating, fishing, and other outdoor activities. But underneath the seemingly normal surface, he was a bit of a delinquent. In late 2013, he was charged with a misdemeanor for underage possession of alcohol. This is a pretty common offense and hardly serious since Austin was 18 at the time that this happened, but the only reason it's even worth mentioning is because it was just the first of many instances of Austin finding himself in trouble.
And this is when they say when you're a youth, stay away from substances because you can become vulnerable in the future.
Conversation Austin had with some followers on his Discord after discussing his past experiences with abusing adrenaline shots and salvia, he says this.
People's living rooms.
Twice before?
Nah. K2?
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I was about to say, I used to be heavily addicted to it, dude. Oh, I got sick without it. I did it so much, I would be sick when I didn't have it. When I told you that I stole my dad's coin collection, like Bill said or whatever, I literally was buying spice with it, dude. I'm not kidding. I was super, super hooked on it, bro. Like super hooked on spice.
If you didn't pick up on what he said there, he's talking about a substance called spice, or K2, which is a synthetic drug that, according to an avid viewer of his, once caused Austin to have a reaction that made him sleep for a whole week straight. But however bad that was for his health, it was another substance that led Austin to nearly lose his freedom, Xanax. In August of 2014, when he was 19 years old, Austin's addiction got to the point that he became willing to commit crimes in order to fuel his habit. He promptly got together with 3 others and went on a car burgling spree in James City County, getting into over 100 vehicles and stealing things from them. Coins, wallets, cell phones, jewelry, watches, credit cards, cameras, power tools, car parts, televisions, and even a firearm at one point was lifted from one of the cars that they targeted. I should say that, despite how extensive these thefts were, they were very much petty crimes of opportunity. They rarely actually broke into the cars they were stealing from, as they aimed primarily for cars left unlocked. It's also worth mentioning that Austin just joined this series of car raids, as his accomplices were already committing them way before he got involved. While Austin's date of offense was listed as August 30th, the thefts were taking place all the way back from late July to early September. Finally, after nearly 2 months of Austin's crew running rampant through the neighborhoods of James City County, one man witnessed 2 individuals stealing items from his daughter's car, and after chasing the 2 suspects on foot, he managed to get a partial license plate from the car they sped off in. The police tracked these 2 individuals down and interrogated them, one of them being Austin, who most likely proceeded to give up his co-conspirators, leading to all of them being arrested. And the reason I say that he likely gave up his co-conspirators is because when the police went through Austin's phone, they found that he and his accomplice had taken pictures with not 1, but 3 firearms that they had stolen. And Austin had even looked up the prices of the items they'd stolen to see how much he was going to get for them. Yet, somehow, Austin was only charged with felony grand larceny and conspiracy to commit, with his accomplice, Aaron Lee, taking on the charges for the theft of the guns.
Okay. This is just a little introduction on him. Let's just see some live in action stuff.
right mind would loan money to a guy who's publicly known for being in billions worth of debt. But you see, this is the beginning of a cycle that would go on for the rest of Austin's gambling career. The people who give him money often don't want it back. In fact, they want Austin to lose it all and proceed to lose his mind along with his money and start screaming and destroying his bedroom. Indirectly, they're just paying to be entertained, and when Austin blocks the people to whom he owes money and calls them all rats, that's just part of the show.
But it's at this point we have to acknowledge a core tenet of Bossman Jack's philosophy: gooning. We have analyzed Austin's brainwaves to the point that we are able to synthesize all of his gambling addiction nodes into a serum that will prevent all of you from falling into the gooning ecosystem. The result? The Stop Gooning hat.
The Stop Gooning hat is
with my cock. I live 400 with my penis. Have a good one, fellas. Stay in school.
Unfortunately, Monkey Time had to come to an end, and as Austin prepared to make a full-fledged return to gambling, he wisened up and put up some barricades to prevent rat activity. Namely, he began deleting his VODs whenever he did something crazy and restarting the stream so that no one could clip his insane rage moments. Because of this, one of his crash outs in which he lost all of his money and flung his chair across the room nearly became lost media. But fortunately, people found ways to work around his strategy, and I'm pretty sure that this was the clip they were talking about.
I just lost it all. I just lost it all.
Immediately, as he picked up gambling, he became so depressed that he started offering to shave himself bald if someone were to juice him up.
I'll shave my head bald. Will somebody please help me with some money, man? Oh my gosh, dude.
In his depressed stupor, he accidentally doxed himself by showing the banned chat phrases on stream, as well as revealing he had banned over 3,000 people from his chat. Soon after, Austin was promptly welcomed in to the Dimensional Merge.
Oh, Barbara's Barbussy! Barbussy! Barbussy!
If there's one person whose mojo is powerful enough to sustain the Dimensional Merge, it's gotta be Bossman. Finally, after disintegrating entire economies through his stake account, he finally made about $200, which he celebrated in a very unique way.
$248. Damn, that pussy nice!
It is nice indeed, but like always, it didn't last very long. This man is simply unable to stop. In another clip from the same period, he burns through everything he had on his account on slots, all while saying he was gonna leave if he didn't win.
Actually, I'm only gonna do 10 spins. If I don't get in, I'm leaving. I'll do another 10 to see if I can show you how to get in. Do 2 more spins, I'm leaving. 11, I'm leaving. I said I wouldn't go below 11, I lied. 3 more spins, I'm leaving. All right, I'm leaving, guys. 1 more spin, I'm leaving. 1 more spin. Last spin.
Finally, Austin gave up his gambling career to become a bird. As his shenanigans hiked in intensity, people once again got to wondering how much money had gone into the black hole, and in their investigations, they turned up with something interesting. Austin was gambling off stream, and unlike his usual routine, he withdrew a few thousand worth of winnings, paid all of his debt off, bought hundreds worth of drugs, and kept 1,600 to himself. All of this being verifiable by checking his crypto address. Given, he already burned through the rest of his money gambling, but it's interesting that when he's off stream, he can at least make the rational decision of investing some of his money back into his Zaza stash. Once they cobbled together a total amount based on his account status, KF user Doot Skeleton concluded that Bossman had wagered over 120,000 times, which amounted to almost $2.5 million. Now, despite how absurd these values may seem, we have to keep in mind that the majority of this money came from and immediately went right back to the casino. Obviously, it's not as if Bossman started out sitting on a stack of $2 million and turned it into dust. Despite their overall acknowledgement that Austin wasn't someone to envy or admire, he quickly went from being infamous to being sympathized with by his trolls, who were now making endearing memes of him. If he really wanted to, he could really turn his online presence around and bank on how many people were practically fans of his who wanted to see him do well. For a moment there, divine intervention even struck, and Austin was repeatedly being met with session errors whenever he tried to start gambling again. If only he took this as a sign to change his ways. How different things could have been. While Austin was winning, he was happy. Too happy, even.
Oh my god! Mom! Mom! Oh my god! Mom! I just won $1,000!
But, as he always does, he started losing again, and not only did he lose all of the money he made gambling off stream, he also smoked through all the stuff he bought. Which, by the way, despite not being too familiar with the ZA, I think should have lasted him a week or two if he didn't hit it so psychotically. Once again, he crashed out on Discord and his Kick chat, and of course, on stream.
No! I lost! Oh my god.
His losing streak continued, and his mood continued to plummet.
This is so sad.
Yeah, that is sad. So, you notice how he was getting very excited and he would be pissed off when he lost. So that quick win is a dopamine hit. And let's let Dr. Andrew Hubberman explain.
Most people have heard of dopamine, and we hear all the time now about dopamine hits. But actually, there's no such thing as a dopamine hit. And actually, the way that your body uses dopamine is to have a baseline level of dopamine, meaning an amount of dopamine that's circulating in your brain and body all the time. And that turns out to be important for how you feel generally, whether or not you're in a good mood, motivated, etc. And you also can experience peaks in dopamine above baseline. But if you remember nothing else from this episode, please remember this, that when you experience something or you crave something really desirable, really exciting to you, very pleasurable, what happens afterwards is your baseline level of dopamine drops. Okay, so these peaks in dopamine, they influence how much dopamine will generally be circulating afterward. And you might think, oh, a big peak in dopamine, after that, I'm going to feel even better because I just had this great event. Not the case. What actually happens is that your baseline level of dopamine drops. And fortunately, most people do not experience or pursue enormous increases in dopamine leading to these severe drops in baseline. Many people do, however, and that's what we call addiction. When somebody pursues a drug or an activity that leads to huge increases in dopamine, and now you understand that afterward the baseline of dopamine drops because of depletion of dopamine, the readily releasable pool, the dopamine is literally not around to be released, and so people feel pretty lousy. And many people make the mistake of then going and pursuing the dopamine evoking, the dopamine releasing activity or substance again, thinking mistakenly that it's going to bring up their baseline. It's going to give them that peak again. Not only does it not give them a peak, their baseline gets lower and lower because they're depleting dopamine more and more and more. And we've seen this over and over again. When people get addicted to something, then they're not achieving much pleasure at all. Dopamine is a universal currency in all mammals, but especially in humans, for moving us toward goals. And how much dopamine is in our system at any one time compared to how much dopamine was in our system a few minutes ago, and how much we remember enjoying a particular experience of the past. That dictates your so-called quality of life and your desire to pursue things. This is really important. Dopamine is a currency, and it's the way that you track pleasure. It's the way that you track success. It's the way that you track whether or not you are doing well or doing poorly. And that is subjective. But if your dopamine is too low, you will not feel motivated. If your dopamine is really high, you will feel motivated. And if your dopamine is somewhere in the middle, how you feel depends on whether or not you had higher dopamine a few minutes ago or lower dopamine. This is important. Your experience of life and your level of motivation and drive depends on how much dopamine you have relative to your recent experience. This is, again, something that's just not accounted for in the simple language of dopamine hits. Okay? A simple way to envision dopamine hits is every time you do something you like, you eat a piece of chocolate, dopamine hit. You look at your Instagram, dopamine hit. You see someone you like, dopamine hit. You know, all these things described as dopamine hits neglect the fact that if you scroll social media and you see something you really like, dopamine hit. Sure, there's an increase in dopamine. But then you get to something else and you go, not that interesting. However, had you arrived at that second thing first, you might think that it was really interesting. If you had arrived to that second Instagram post 3 days later or 4 days later, you might find it extremely interesting. Again, how much dopamine you experience from something depends on your baseline level of dopamine when you arrive there and your previous dopamine peaks. Okay? That's super important to understand, and it's completely neglected by the general language of dopamine hits. This is why when you repeatedly engage in something that you enjoy, your threshold for enjoyment goes up and up and up. Dopamine is this universal currency. It establishes value based on not just what you're experiencing in the moment, but what you experienced in the days and minutes before. Now that you understand how your previous level of dopamine relates to your current level of dopamine, and how your current level of dopamine will influence your future level of dopamine, it should become obvious why things like pornography, not just the accessibility of pornography, but the intensity of pornography, can negatively shape real-world romantic and sexual interactions. This is a serious concern. The discussion is happening now. The underlying neurobiological mechanisms you now understand. And this isn't to pass judgment on whether or not people like or don't like pornography. That's an ethical discussion, and it's a moral discussion that has to be decided for each individual by virtue of age, etc. But again, any activity that evokes a lot of dopamine release will make it harder to achieve the same level, and certainly the greater level of dopamine through a subsequent interaction. So yes, indeed, many people are addicted to pornography. And yes, indeed, many people who regularly indulge in pornography experience challenges in real-world romantic interactions. You now understand the mechanisms behind what I'm telling you. You can even see this with video games. People will play a video game. They love it. It's super exciting to them. And then they'll keep playing and playing and playing.
I met Jen after she was ghosted by an ex.
Two things happens, typically both. First of all, I always say addiction is a progressive narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure. So oftentimes what will happen is the person only has excitement and can achieve dopamine release to the same extent doing that behavior and not other behaviors. And so they start losing interest in school, they start losing interest in relationships, they start losing interest in fitness and well-being, and depletes their life. And eventually what typically happens is they will stop getting dopamine release from that activity as well, and then they drop into a pretty serious depression. And this can get very severe, and people have committed suicide from these sorts of patterns of activity. Just very briefly, because it was also covered in the interview episode I did with Anna Lemke about addiction, some of you might be asking, what should I do if I experience a drop in my baseline level of dopamine because of engagement with some activity or some substance that led to big peaks? Just to put some color and example on this, a few episodes ago I talked about a friend who I've known a long time. This is actually the child of a friend who has basically become addicted to video games. He decided, actually after seeing that episode with Anna, to do a 30-day complete fast from phone, from video games, and from social media of all kinds. He's now at day 29. He's really accomplished this. Not incidentally, his levels of concentration, his overall mood are up. He's doing far, far better. What he did is hard. In particular, the first 14 days is really hard. But the way that you replenish the releasable pool of dopamine is to not engage in these dopaminergic seeking behaviors. Because remember, typically people arrive at a place where they want to stop engaging in these behaviors or ingesting substances when that dopamine is depleted, when they're not getting the same lift. In his case, he was feeling depressed. He thought he had ADHD. They were starting to treat it as ADHD. And certainly there are people out there who have ADHD, but what he found was that his levels of concentration are back. He does not need to be treated for ADHD. And actually the psychiatrist wondered if he did prior to this video game social media fast. He's feeling good. He's exercising again. I'm not making this up. This is really a very specific but very relevant example of how the dopamine system can replenish itself.
So if you want to go see more, definitely go check out Andrew Hubberman. Fasting is very important. So what are you addicted to, and how do you fast from that? The power comes in rewiring the brain.
95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a memorized set of behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that function like a computer program. So then a person can say with their 5% of their conscious mind, I want to be healthy, I want to be happy, I want to be free. But the body's on a whole different program. People grab their cell phone, they check their WhatsApp, they check their texts, they check their emails, they check Facebook, they tweet something, they do Instagram, they check the news, and now they feel really connected to everything that's known in their life. And then they go through a series of routine behaviors. They get out of bed on the same side, they go to the toilet, they get a cup of coffee, they take a shower, they get dressed, they drive to work the same way, they do the same things, they see the same people, they push the same emotional buttons, and that becomes the routine, and it becomes like a program. So now they've lost their free will to a program, and there's no unseen hand doing it to them. So when it comes time to change, the redundancy of that cycle becomes a subconscious program. Most people then wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis. They wait for loss, some tragedy to make up their mind to change. And my message is, why wait? And you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. And I think right now, the cool thing is that people are waking up. If you're not being defined by a vision of the future, then you're left with the old memories of the past, and you will be predictable in your life. How you think and how you feel creates your state of being. By closing your eyes and mentally rehearsing some action, if you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between what you're imaging and what you're experiencing.
This is the power of visualization.
So then you begin to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like the event has already occurred. Now, your brain is no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. And if you keep doing it, priming it that way, the hardware becomes a software program, and who knows, you just may start acting like a happy person. And then I think the hardest part is to teach our body emotionally what the future will feel like ahead of the actual experience. The hardest part about change is not making the same choices you did the day before, period. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready, because it's going to feel uncomfortable.
Amen.
So if you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and we do, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, and you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, your life's not going to change very much, because the same thought leads to the same choice leads to the same behavior creates the same experience, and the same experience produces the same emotion. A habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. So if you think about it, people wake up in the morning, they begin to think about their problems. Those problems are circuits of memories in the brain. Each one of those memories are connected to people and things at certain times and places. And if the brain is a record of the past, the moment they start their day, they're already thinking in the past. Each one of those memories has an emotion. Emotions are the end product of past experiences. So the moment they recall those memories of their problems, they all of a sudden feel unhappy, they feel sad, they feel pain. Now, how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So the person's entire state of being when they start their day is in the past. So what does that mean? The familiar past will sooner or later be predictable future. So if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny.
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus. And this...
Sorry guys for the ads, this is all real time.
You can't think greater than how you feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking. By very definition of emotions, you're thinking in the past. And for the most part, you're going to keep creating the same life. I think that the bigger thing is that we keep firing and wiring those circuits. They become more hardwired. So you have a thought and then the program runs. But it's the emotion that follows the thought. If you have a fearful thought, you're going to feel anxiety. The moment you feel anxiety, your brain's checking in with your body and saying, yeah, you're pretty anxious. So then you start thinking more corresponding thoughts equal to how you feel. Well, the redundancy of that cycle conditions the body to become the mind. So now, when it comes time to change, the person steps into that river of change and they make a different choice, and all of a sudden, they don't feel the same way. So the body says, well, you've been doing this for 35 years. You're going to just stop suffering and stop feeling guilty and stop feeling shameful, and you're not going to complain or blame or make excuses or feel sorry for yourself. Well, the body's in the unknown. So the body says, I want to return back to familiar territory.
Right.
So the body starts influencing the mind, and it says,
right. Mind over matter, mind over matter. Reprogram the mind. How you think is how you feel. How you think is how you speak to yourself. Are you thinking from the past, or you have the vision of the future? And a lot of us just do not know how to get out of the way and wipe that slate clean, so we're no longer tied to the past, but we catch a vision of who we are, we remember who we are, and we start moving to the future. This is the importance of reprogramming your mind. No matter where you are, what you're doing, we all have addictions. And this is why I personally use on my journey hypnotherapy, meditation, affirmations. I needed to build this base foundation, hardwire my brain before I could even approach what really, really expedited and made me clean my slate. And that was the power of the plant medicine, specifically the mushroom.
Start tomorrow. You're too much like your mother. You'll never change. This isn't going to work for you. This doesn't feel right. And so if you respond to that thought as if it's true, that same thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience, which will produce the same emotion. The stronger the emotional reaction you have to some experience in your life, the higher the emotional quotient, the more you pay attention to the cause. And the moment the brain puts all of its attention on the cause, it takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. So long-term memories are created from very highly emotional experiences. So what happens then is that people think neurologically within the circuitry of that experience, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And so when you have an emotional reaction to someone or something, most people think that they can't control their emotional reaction. Well, it turns out if you allow that emotional reaction, it's called a refractory period, to last for hours or days, that's called a mood. I say to someone, hey, what's up? You say, I'm in a mood. Well, why are you in a mood? Well, I had this thing happen to me 5 days ago, and I'm having one long emotional reaction. If you keep that same emotional reaction going on for weeks or months, that's called temperament. Why is he so bitter? I don't know, let's ask him. Why is he so bitter? Why are you bitter? Well, I had this thing happen to me 9 months ago. And if you keep that same emotional reaction going on for years on end, that's called a personality trait. And so learning how to shorten your refractory period of emotional reactions is really where the work starts.
That is the power of detachment. Like I said, I worked with hypnotherapy. When I first started my journey, all the hypnotherapy was about detachment. I needed to detach from the feelings that I was having, from the thoughts I was having. So I had the ability to choose in that moment when anything happened, do I want to feed this or do I want to turn the opposite way? It's happening, it's real life, but I can feed it and make it prolonged, or I can use it to my advantage and let it spark the imagination, the intuition to figure out the solution.
So then people, when they have an event, what they do is they keep recalling the event because the emotions of stress hormones, the survival emotions, are saying pay attention to what happened because you want to be prepared if it happens again. So as you become familiar with the thoughts, the behaviors, and the emotions of the old self, you're retiring that old self. As you fire and wire new thoughts and condition the body into a new emotional state, if you do that enough times, it'll begin to become familiar to you. So it's so important, just like a garden. If you're planting a garden, you got to get rid of the weeds.
Yes.
You got to take the plants from the past year and you got to pull them out.
Yes.
The rocks that sift to the top that are like our emotional blocks, they have to be removed. The soil has to be tenderized and broken down. We have to make room to plant the new garden.
Absolutely.
So primarily, we learn the most about ourselves and others when we're uncomfortable. All organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. You know, a deer gets chased by a pack of coyotes. When it outruns the coyotes, it goes back to grazing and the event is over. And the definition of stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance, out of homeostasis. The stress response is what the body innately does to return itself back to order. So you're driving down the road, someone cuts you off, you jam on the brakes, you give them the finger, and then you settle back down and the event is over and boom, now everything's back to normal. But what if it's not a predator that's waiting for you outside the cave, but what if it's your coworker sitting right next to you, and all day long you're turning on those chemicals because they're pushing all your emotional buttons. When you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease, because no organism in nature can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time.
Stress is the key that creates disease. And this, is learned in yoga and ancient sciences that have learned that the body and the stress stored in the body is what causes disease. So the key is to manage your stress, to manage and reprogram your mind, so whenever something comes up, you take care of it and it doesn't get stored in the body, because over time, this is what can turn into sickness.
It's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease, long-term effects. Human beings, because of the size of the neocortex, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. We can think about our problems and turn on those chemicals. That means then our thoughts could make us sick. So if it's possible that our thoughts could make us sick, is it possible then our thoughts could make us well? The answer is absolutely yes.
Thank you for that, Dr. Joe Dispenza. So it's important, guys, to understand that our minds are a computer and that we have the ability to reprogram. And once you wake up to this, you'll start to learn that, okay, I have choice. I have choice. And a lot of us have been pre-programmed to feel like we don't have choice, and we've intentionally given up our free will. So once we get control of this, once we learn how to access visualization, once we detach from all the emotions that kept us from where we are, once we understand how to mitigate stress, how to use healing modalities, this is what sound healing is, this is what yoga's for, this is what meditation's for. It's to help us process and to help us stay in a state of equilibrium, so whatever happens to us, we can move past. A lot of us have been so knocked out and out of alignment and out of whack that we don't even know how to get to the point where we can start this over and do this. And I tell a lot of people to use affirmations. So if you go to my channel at Shaman Psychologist, I'll show you at the end, we have affirmations there that you can use while you sleep. Because the way to understand how to impregnate the subconscious mind is to use it to your advantage. And there's specific times during the day, right when you wake up, right before you go to sleep, that your mind is more susceptible to the ideas that you give it. So are you thinking about what you need to do tomorrow? Are you stressing out about what happened earlier in the day? Are you thinking about bad stuff, about the past, subconsciously, not even realizing where these loops are coming from? Or are you intentionally creating the pathway? Are you intentionally laying down the railroad? This is the power that we all have, and you must take it seriously. But let's talk about procrastination, because this is something that I've been heavily addicted to, and I feel a lot of us in society are.
It's 5 p.m. and you've just realized that report you've been putting off is due tomorrow. It's time to buckle down, open your computer, and check your phone. Maybe catch up on your favorite YouTube channel. Actually, you should probably make dinner first. You usually like cooking, though it's hard to enjoy with this work hanging over your head. And, oh, it's actually pretty late. Maybe you should just try again in the morning. This is the cycle of procrastination, and I promise you, we have all been there. But why do we keep procrastinating even when we know it's bad for us? To be clear, putting something off isn't always procrastinating. Responsible time management requires deciding which tasks are important and which ones can wait. Procrastination is when we avoid a task we said we would do for no good reason, despite expecting our behavior to bring negative consequences. Obviously, it's irrational to do something you expect to harm you. But ironically, procrastination is the result of our bodies trying to protect us, specifically by avoiding a task we see as threatening. When you realize you need to write that report, your brain responds like it would to any incoming threat. Your amygdala, a set of neurons involved in emotional processing and threat identification, releases hormones, including adrenaline, that kick off a fear response. This stress-induced panic can overpower the impulses from your prefrontal cortex, which typically help you think long-term and regulate your emotions. And it's in the midst of this fight, flight, or freeze response that you decide to handle the threat by avoiding it in favor of some less stressful task. This response might seem extreme. After all, it's just a deadline, not a bear attack. But we're most likely to procrastinate tasks that evoke negative feelings, such as dread, incompetence, and insecurity. Studies of procrastinating university students have found participants were more likely to put off tasks they perceived as stressful or challenging, and the perception of how difficult the task is increases while you're putting it off. In one experiment, students were given reminders to study throughout the day. While they were studying, most reported that it wasn't so bad, but when they were procrastinating, they consistently rated the idea of studying as very stressful, making it difficult to get started. Because procrastination is motivated by our negative feelings, some individuals are more susceptible to it than others. People who have difficulty regulating their emotions and those who struggle with low self-esteem are much more likely to procrastinate, regardless of how good they are at time management. However, it's a common misconception that all procrastinators are lazy. In the body and brain, laziness is marked by low energy and general apathy. When you're feeling lazy, you're more likely to sit around doing nothing than distract yourself with unimportant tasks. In fact, many people procrastinate because they care too much. Procrastinators often report a high fear of failure, putting things off because they're afraid their work won't live up to their high standards. Whatever the reason for procrastination, the results are often the same. Frequent procrastinators are likely to suffer from anxiety and depression, ongoing feelings of shame, higher stress levels, and physical ailments associated with high stress. Worst of all, while procrastination hurts us in the long run, it does temporarily reduce our stress level, reinforcing it as a bodily response for coping with stressful tasks. So, how can we break the cycle of procrastination? Traditionally, people thought procrastinators needed to cultivate discipline and practice strict time management. But today, many researchers feel the exact opposite. Being too hard on yourself can layer additional bad emotions onto a task, making the threat even more intense. To short-circuit this stress response, we need to address and reduce these negative emotions. Some simple strategies include breaking a task into smaller elements, or journaling about why it's stressing you out and addressing those underlying concerns. Try removing nearby distractions that make it easy to impulsively procrastinate. And more than anything, it helps to cultivate an attitude of self-compassion, forgiving yourself and making a plan to do better next time. Because a culture that perpetuates this cycle of stress and procrastination hurts all of us in the long term.
So it's important to forgive yourself. Whatever you're experiencing, it's very, very important to forgive yourself. You're powerful and you're here for a purpose. And it's very critical that no matter what you've been through, the trauma you've been through, the stress that you experience, to know that you have the potential to be on the other side. You have the power to become what you're meant to be. And it's on the side of reprogramming your mind, activating this computer and not choosing to live a life of dogma and what society has imposed on you, but for you to rewire your brain and educate yourself and to make your own decisions so you can be in control of your mind. You start to not care what people think. You start to become detached, not apathetic, but detached, very present, but you are in control, no one else. And that raises the question, is addiction really a choice? Or is this something that is just inherited? So let's have Dr. Gabor explain.
Not that I'm claiming to be a fully cooked meal, but I'm certainly much more ripe than I used to be. A lot of us are normal and unhealthy at the same time. Can people change who they are? They need to become who they are. Hello, my name is Gabor Mate, and we're here at Penguin in England to answer some big questions. So the assumption in legal circles and throughout the whole, what's rightly called the criminal justice system, because it is a criminal system. The criminal justice system, in its criminality, makes the utterly unscientific, unfounded, and false assumption that people choose to be addicted. Now, first of all, I've worked with severely drug-addicted people in Vancouver's downtown east side. The Western world's most notorious area of drug use, by the way, is in Vancouver's downtown east side. In my 12 years of work there, I met not a single female patient who had not been sexually abused as a child. Now, who the heck chooses to be sexually abused as a child? All the men had been severely traumatized in multiple ways. Who the heck chooses to be traumatized in childhood? The addiction, then, is an attempt to soothe the pain that's imposed by childhood trauma. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, my ambition is to become a drug addict and break the law. I mean, think about it. It's a response to pain. Not only that, those traumatic experiences shape the brain itself, the physiology of essential brain circuits, in a way that'll bias that brain towards addictive behaviors, including with substances. I won't go into the neurophysiology of it now, but it's simply brain science. That's not even vaguely controversial. But of course, even physicians don't learn about it, let alone judges, lawyers, or prosecutors. Another point is that if we actually understand what an addiction is, we realize that drugs are only a small part of the addictive spectrum. I define addiction as manifested in any behavior that a person finds temporary pleasure or relief in, and therefore craves, but suffers negative consequences in the long term as a result of, but does not give up despite negative consequences. So craving pleasure, relief in the short term, harm, inability to give it up. That's what an addiction is.
Right.
Now, notice in that definition, I said nothing about drugs. Yes, they could involve substances, some illegal, like heroin, some even more toxic than heroin, but legal, like alcohol. The definition also includes people who are addicted to gambling, to shopping, to eating, to work, to the internet, to pornography, to sex, to power, to a whole lot of other human behaviors. Why are we ostracizing a particular segment of the addicted population where virtually all of us in this particular stressful culture have some addictive patterns in our lives or have had? So it's criminal. And this whole belief that addiction is a choice is so unscientific as it would be laughable if its consequences weren't so tragic. So, the myth of normal. What does it actually mean? Well, norm, first of all, is a statistic, but it doesn't say anything about healthy or not healthy. It just says it's in a certain range. Now, in medicine, there's legitimate use of the word normal, where the norm is actually identifiable with natural and healthy. But, for example, to give you an egregiously fanciful scenario, if everybody in London tortured their pets, then not torturing your pet would be abnormal. That's just a statistical statement. It's got nothing to do with health or well-being or naturalness. Now, in our society, a lot of behaviors, practices, policies, cultural norms are not just the norm in the statistical sense, in that most people engage in them, but they're also confused with healthy and natural, which, as I've been saying in this conversation, they're not. So that's what I mean, first of all, by the myth of normal. There's this myth that what we've got here is normal. It's not. Not when it comes to understanding human needs and human health in a holistic sense. The other sense in which I talk about the myth of normal is that there's this belief that there's those of us that are quote-unquote healthy, and then there's the rest of them who are abnormal. I'm saying no. First of all, health, whether physical or mental, is a spectrum. it's not that you can sort of delineate the healthy from the unhealthy. These are normal, these are not normal. That's a very dangerous game, number one. Number two, the illnesses of body and mind are actually normal responses to an abnormal cultural milieu. The fact about human beings is that we're not solitary, isolated creatures, either physiologically or psychologically, emotionally or spiritually. So our physiology is bound up. In fact, it's a unit with our emotional and psychological spiritual existence. That's the reality of human beings. The second reality is that none of that can be separated from a social and emotional environment. So that how we feel about ourselves has a huge impact on our physiology, and how we feel about ourselves is very much determined by our relationships from in utero onwards. From our existence in the womb, we're being affected by the emotional states of our mothers. That's been demonstrated in multiple studies. It's not even in doubt. But the emotional states of our mothers depend on so much else other than just how they feel as individuals, on their social class, on their relationship with their partners, if any, on their own childhood experiences, including traumas, on the work they have to do, and many other social factors. And I'm only talking about in the womb. So already, children or infants of mothers who are stressed during pregnancy have biological markers of that stress in their bodies. Already at birth. These influences act on us throughout our childhood and, of course, throughout our adult existence, because what we are is what has been called biopsychosocial creatures. Our biology is not separable from our psychological, emotional experiences in a social context. So therefore, the nature of the world that we live in has much to do with our physiological health and with our mental health.
Wow. So, man, it's very, very important, guys, to learn how to get out of the way, to learn how to reprogram the mind, rewire, and understand where has this trauma come from. We must become aware. Awareness is where the power is, because once you're aware of where your stress and your childhood trauma has been triggered and stored in your body, and you have this awareness of somatic, your ability to identify what's trapped in your body, where it's trapped, and to be able to access and really identify why is it trapped there and what can I do about it. And sometimes you can't do anything but try to get out of the way, right? We all try to fix ourselves, but how can ourselves fix the self that's sick? We are sick ourselves, so how can we fix ourselves? We must get out of the way. We must use our mind to our advantage, and we must learn the concepts that is just the power of the brain. And that's what we're going to speak on right here, which is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself. Okay? So let's let this video explain a little bit more.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. the old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
So neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, think of it as you're paving a roadmap, okay? And you have the ability to create this new road. And that road is, you can put lights on that road and light posts so you know where you're going. And that's the ability of rewiring. That's the ability of neuroplasticity. That's the ability of getting out of your way enough to understand and to become more aware. And as that process grows on itself, you start to learn more and more and more, and your brain's ability to heal itself becomes activated. And this is where the powerful substance of the mushroom comes into play.
Psilocybin is a substance found in a number of mushroom species that can be ingested to cause psychoactive effects. It is considered a psychedelic or hallucinogenic drug with some similarities to LSD in terms of effects. Psilocybin itself is not thought to be very psychoactive, but soon after it is ingested, it is metabolized into a substance called psilocin, which is highly psychoactive. Psilocybin is thus considered a prodrug, or a substance that is inactive until converted into an active drug after administration. Although we have some understanding of the activity of psilocin in the brain, it is not fully understood how this activity leads to the subjective experiences people have while taking psilocybin. Regardless, it is thought that psilocin's activity at a subtype of serotonin receptor, known as the 5-HT2A receptor, is critical to the drug's psychedelic effects. Psilocin is thought to act as a partial agonist at the 5-HT2A receptor, which means that it binds to the 5-HT2A receptor and causes a response that is a fraction of what the natural ligand, serotonin, does. Psilocin also interacts with other targets, like other serotonin receptor subtypes, some subtypes of dopamine, histamine, and adrenergic receptors, and the serotonin transporter. The role of these other targets and the effects of psilocybin, however, is not very clear. Like many other psychedelic drugs, repeated administration of psilocybin over multiple days leads to rapid tolerance and substantially reduced effectiveness. This tolerance is thought to be associated with the downregulation or decrease in number of 5-HT2A serotonin receptors. Psilocybin also exhibits cross-tolerance with LSD, meaning that if someone develops tolerance to one of these drugs, they may display tolerance to the other, regardless of their history with the other drug. Psilocybin, however, is not generally considered to be addictive, and is thought to be safe in terms of its effects on the body.
Thank you.
I knew I was underwater.
So guys, if you guys are interested in getting out of the way, rewiring your mind, experiencing an intimate mushroom experience, and to fully clear yourself and have a brand new slate, a lot of us learn all of this information that I'm sharing, but we're not in a place to actually apply it. We are still in our way. And the power of getting out of your own way is being able to demolish your old self. The main thing about this powerful medicine, and I call it a medicine because it's exactly what it is. It's not a drug. There's receptors in our brain that have been waiting to receive the psilocin. Why does our brain and our body break it down so easily? We can get into this in another stream, but the main key is that you have the ability to wipe the slate clean, to get out of your own way and get your ego demolished. This is the fear of doing a journey. You feel as if you may die, and it's a thought. It's just an internal feeling that feels like it's so real that you're going to experience it in real life. And really what that is your ego dissolving. And this ego is the part of the brain, the mind, that is holding on to all your old thoughts, all your old patterns, telling you this is who you are, this is how you're seen, this is who you're supposed to be. And that is us getting in our own way. We think we are who we are. And the power with a perfect and a deeply guided journey is that you remember who you really are. Dr. Gabor Mate just said, it's not about curing the disease and are we messed up. It's about remembering who we truly are and becoming who we truly are. All the thoughts, all the actions, everything that we experienced, all the trauma, that's not who we are. That's part of our story. And that story can give us the power and the courage to jump in and to dive into the abyss, to be able to change our mind, to be able to change and not wait for when disease strikes. We have the ability to cure our minds now. And this is how we self-heal. This is how we self-awaken. And if you guys are interested, go ahead, visit www.finallydetached and come down here and book a free consultation call. And the power of this is to be able to turn everything that was bad, everything that you thought was negative about you, into your superpower, right? We have the ability to rewire our brains and to turn the bad into the good. And this is what the magic of the mushroom did for me. It took everything that was wrong with me and it made it what was right for me. And nothing changed on the outside. It was internal. And because I started to think different, I started to move different. And because I started to move different, my reality changed. So guys, if you're interested, join me, Shaman Gabriel, and my psychologist, my partner, Yi Lin, and let's go do some work and help you change your mind so you can transform the negative into positive. And here's an example of, turning an addiction to drugs and bad behavior and low self-esteem and procrastination into an addiction for work.
You have to become obsessed. Obsession is when you're out of ammo and you still run at the guy and take him out. Obsession is the thing that makes heroes. Motivation doesn't make a hero. Obsession keeps you up at night. Motivation doesn't keep you up at night, dude. So, how do you get there? Do you get there by showing up every day and not quitting? And how do you show up every day and not quit? You have to become obsessed. I know everybody's looking for, hey, when did your life change? Look, it changes every day.
Making the decisions.
Back to the obsessed thing. You can either be like, do one or two things and try to balance the rest of your life, or you can be obsessed with your life and make sure you cram as much as you can into it. And it didn't happen overnight. It's about get obsessed, be obsessed, stay obsessed, and then surround yourself with other people that are maniacs. And then you're going to stay focused on the task, get people around you that don't make excuses, get rid of people that do, and then you're going to be like, hey, we're going to Mars, dude, no matter what it takes, what it costs. And you got to keep feeding the dream, And so that's what I've done, dude. From 8 years old, 7, 8 years old, I've just been feeding the beast. And when I quit feeding the beast of my dreams and fantasies, when I quit giving them energy, what happened was my life went downhill. So by the time I'm 25, I'm broke, I'm wrecked, I'm spiritually bankrupt, I'm physically bankrupt, I hate myself. But I didn't quit, I just had to start rebuilding from zero. What went wrong was I denied the obsessions I have about the greatness that I believed was possible for me. And when I denied my greatness, my potential, my fantasies about the future, right? When I denied that, dude, you're pushing so much energy down. I did what people say you shouldn't do, okay? I traded a negative addiction for work.
Trading a negative addiction for work. This is just one example of many of how you can turn a negative into a positive.
So I have never met a super successful person that somebody hadn't labeled a work addict.
That's why I'm saying, if you guys are addicted, if you guys have this personality trait, that is your superpower. That is what will push you ahead. That is what will make you into what you're supposed to be.
Like when work becomes an addiction, dude, we got a problem with labels. You know, I remember my dad, he didn't have a problem with work. He said work is good. He said more work is better. He said lots of work is even better than that. And if you could get a whole bunch of people working together, you could actually accomplish something. Now, fast forward, you know, to somewhere in the last 20 years, work became an addiction. Like, oh my God, you're a work addict, you're a compulsive work person, you're overachiever, you have problems in your life. I'm like, dude, the only problem I got in my life is that you telling me work is a bad thing. The more I work, the better I am. The more I get accomplished, the happier I am. The more I work and the more I accomplish, the better I feel about myself. I'm not trying to fill up a hole. I'm trying to reach my potential. So how do you get there? I mean, do you get there by showing up every day and not quitting? And how do you show up every day and not quit? You have to become obsessed.
So guys, it's very important to understand that addiction stems from trauma and it stems from stress. And stress itself can stem from unresolved trauma. And most of the trauma that we experience is from childhood and even pre-childhood, before we're even born, when we're in our mom's womb. This is why it's so important as a society to heal our trauma, to take it seriously, because as one heals, generations heal. And if you're, you know, as a lady having a child to cure trauma, to feel better, right? Because you feel like there's something missing. You need to figure out what's missing before you do that, because those feelings are what's passing on to the child. And our own ability to not heal and not turn towards our trauma and not take it seriously is creating generations that are getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And we can see this. This is why we're so dependent on social media. This is why we're so dependent on technology. This is why we're so dependent on certain things that are not good for us. We're disconnected. We haven't found that spiritual essence. We haven't fully awakened. And our ability to awaken is our ability to understand the brain, our ability to use this to our advantage so we can experience freedom. We all deserve freedom, and we all have the power within us to change our mind. And some of us are predisposed to be very easy to just make a decision, to be inspired very quickly, like watching the video I just played and saying, you know what, I'm not doing XYZ anymore. And they're able to make that decision and to walk that path and to stick to a habit, to do it for 14 days, to do it for 21 days, and for it to start to become a habit. Others have experienced so much trauma, predisposed from childhood or even before that, and even from society, neighborhoods, whatever the conditioning is, that we do not have the ability to do this. And this is why it's so taboo to approach something like a mushroom or like a plant medicine to really do this for ourselves, because if you do, you're considered weak. No, what's weak is not doing it. What's weak is not making the decision to change your mind. What's weak is not trying every single thing possible to make this happen, because it's in your hands. And once you approach some of these plant medicines like the mushroom, you start to realize that this has been used for centuries. This is much deeper than what it's classified as. And there's magic to it. And that magic is something that you can experience. And you must get out of your way to experience that. Because as you do that, as you make the decision to awaken, to become who you are, to get out of the way, you start using the tools of programming your mind, affirmations, meditations, hypnotherapy, things like breath work. You start to get an understanding and the ability to function and to know how to do what you need to do for your body so you can get to where you need to be. Are you overweight? Are you sad? Are you depressed? Are you taking pharmaceutical drugs? Stay away from all of that. You have the power to make this strong. And psilocybin works with the brain. It is brain food. And when you take it, it takes you. It learns who you are, and you learn who you are. And it explains and it speaks, and it takes you much deeper into the labyrinth of who you can be. And it raises the vibration of your energy field, so you begin to attract. You begin to have the thoughts that are geared to the future, not the past. You start to do the things that are good for you, and you start to have control over your mind. Addiction is not a bad thing. It's just, can you control how it's applied? But it really takes a remembering. And that is the process of ego dissolution, of dying to who you are. And that's what we do here at www.finallydetached.com. I highly recommend you go, you visit, do some research, and take the journey.
Ladies and gentlemen, awaken to the power that you are. You must remember there is something inside you that no one can take away. It has no name, no face, no beginning, and no end. It is not your story, your trauma, your fears, or even your greatest triumphs. It is the eternal, the divine essence flowing through all that lives, and it lives within you. Right now, as your eyes trace these words, as your ears soak in this message, and your breath rises and falls, there is a silent force within you that has always been there. It's the same force that kept you breathing through your darkest nights. The same energy that whispered, "Keep going," when your spirit was shattered. The same sacred intelligence that beats your heart without your command. This is who you really are. You are not broken. You are breaking open. You were never meant to live small, suffocated by doubt or dimmed by the expectations of a world too afraid of your light. You are not here to shrink so others can feel comfortable. You are not here to numb your intuition, silence your creativity, or walk a path that someone else carved for you. You are here.
You're here to remember. You're here to remember. So tune in, stay strong, remember who you are, and take the jump, because there's nothing holding you back from becoming what you need to be. There's nothing holding you back but yourself and the ego and the thing that thinks it knows what to do. You have the power within you guys, so if you guys have reached this, if you guys hear me, let's take that jump. Let's take that jump.
To remember. Remember that you are made of stars and storms, that you carry galaxies in your nervous system and oceans in your emotions. You are not weak for feeling deeply. You are not lost for questioning everything. You are not behind for choosing a path that no one else understands. In fact, your sensitivity is your superpower. Your longing is your compass. Your questions are the cracks through which your true self is breaking through. Stop waiting for permission to become. Stop waiting for the world to validate what your soul already knows. You are divine. You are chosen. You are needed right now, not after your healing is complete. Not once you've got it all figured out. Not when you've checked all the boxes or achieved some imagined state of perfection. You are ready now, as you are, imperfect, wild, becoming. Your power is not something you earn, it's something you uncover. Beneath the conditioning, beneath the pain, beneath the false identities you inherited just to survive. There is a wild, ancient fire, and it's calling you home. You didn't come here to play it safe. You came here to wake up. Wake up to the magic in your blood. Wake up to the voice that's been silenced. Wake up to the passion you buried to fit in. Wake up to the frequency of your own truth. The time of hiding is over. You are not made to conform. You were made to create. You were not made to obey. You were made to remember. Remember that you are life itself, flowing, evolving, eternal. That you are the miracle you've been waiting for. That no one else is coming to save you. Because you are the one you've been praying for all along.
You're it.
This isn't about ego. This is about essence. It's about peeling back layers until what's left is the raw, radiant truth of your being. The part of you that knows how to love without fear, how to rise without apology, how to lead with your heart and burn with purpose. The eternal is not something far away. It's not a god in the sky or a concept in a book. It's the breath in your lungs, the stillness in your spine, the rhythm of your heart when you're fully alive. And once you tap into this truth, once you feel the pulse of the universe inside your own body, you will never forget again, not while you're here in this realm. Remember, you are the medicine. You are the healer. You are the revolution. Don't let this world convince you otherwise. Don't let the past bind you to versions of yourself you've outgrown. Don't let fear masquerade as logic and steal your birthright. Don't let the opinions of others drown out your own inner knowing. Remember, you are powerful beyond measure. You are sacred beyond belief. You are divine intelligence made flesh. And you are here right now to wake others up simply by being who you truly are. When you walk with purpose, others remember their own. When you speak your truth, others find their voice. When you heal your wounds, you ripple healing into the field around you. This is how we rise, not by force, but by frequency. Not by preaching, but by embodying. You don't need to explain your light. You just need to let it shine. You don't need to convince anyone of your path. You just need to walk it with devotion. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to say yes to your becoming. Say yes to your own soul. Say yes to the whispers of your intuition. Say yes to the vision that only you can see. Remember, you don't need to be fearless. You just need to keep going. Every time you get back up, you teach the world that it's possible to rise. Every time you choose your truth over your conditioning, you ignite a revolution. And every time you choose love over fear, presence over performance, truth over silence, you shift the timeline of humanity. This is not a metaphor. That is your role in this grand unfolding. You are not random. You are not accidental. You are not too much, too intense, too sensitive, or too late. You are exactly who you need to be at exactly the right time, with exactly the right experiences to awaken what this world is so desperately crying out for. Truth. Remember, you are the channel. You are the storm and the stillness. You are the fire and the peace. You are the divine in human form, and it's time to live like it. So take a deep breath. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Feel the cosmos in your veins. And remember, you are the power. You are the flow. You are the miracle.